the US President Joe Biden, they met. Again, there was a warm hug. This was at the start of the G7 summit. India is a special invitee at the G7, an invitation from the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is having a series of bilateral meetings, not just as part of the G7, but these 6 days, the Prime Minister is traveling to 3 countries. There's Japan, there's Papua New Guinea, and of course there is Australia. 40 meetings the Prime Minister is scheduled to hold with close to 24 heads of state, governments and other top world leaders. The 3 images on your television screen, meeting with the host, the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan, then with the US President and then the British Prime Minister. I want to quickly cut across to India Today's Nupur Tiwari joining us live from Hiroshima. Nupur, quite a packed day for Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Exactly, very much. And a very tight schedule he has been having. At the moment he landed here last evening he landed here, and he was very much warm welcomed by the Indian community and the people here and the Japanese people here. I am just standing here in front of the International Media Center in Hiroshima, and different kind of journalists from all over the world, especially, they're gathering here and they're doing a lot of things. So people are definitely, even the foreign journalists also, they're talking about Mr. Modi's movement, the meetings he has been having since morning. In the morning, he started his day with having the bilateral meeting with Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Kishida, and it was very fruitful. A lot of things they discussed, from tourism to a Quad, everything they have discussed when in the morning. Then the second thing, it was unveiling Gandhiji's statue in the Peace Park, and that is very much significant. Why that is significant? Because Hiroshima, as you know, that 1945, the atomic bomb, it was dropped here by America, and this city really suffered. The 70,000 people, they lost their lives, and afterwards also the city needed everything to rebuild. And from there, so that Peace Park, having the Gandhiji statue, this Hiroshima city, they wanted that, the small initiative, and it has become such a big event today. He unveiled the Gandhiji statue, and it is totally a symbol of peace, not only between India, Japan, but all over the world. And after that, he had meeting with South Korea. He had meeting with Vietnam, and now at the Grand Prince, he had G7 meetings. Lot of meetings, totally he's very much tied up. And
okay, stay with me, Nupur. I also want to bring in India Today's Geeta Mohan, a foreign affairs editor, for more on this. Geeta, a number of very important bilateral meetings the Prime Minister is having on the sidelines of the G7. Important grouping. India has the presidency of G20 this year. But if we were to just stay on the bilaterals, the Prime Minister will be a state guest at the United States of America when he meets Joe Biden in the United States. But this hugplomacy, as many call it, the warm hug with the US President, the warm hug with the British Prime Minister. What are tangible takeaways? What are we taking from all these meetings and the hugs?
Well, a very, very important point, Gaurav, an important question, because G7 is a grouping where India has been a part of it as a guest quite a few times. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself has been a part of it quite a few times. So while India makes its presence felt at the forum with all the conversations that have to do with global, this is an opportunity for Prime Minister Modi, apart from the fact that he will be holding a bilateral when he goes to France for the Bastille Day parade, yes, and with President Biden when he goes to the United States of America for the state visit. But for everyone else, right now, as we speak, he's meeting the French president. But he just met Olaf Scholz. This comes just ahead of his another very important bilateral meeting with President Zelensky. And all the conversations will revolve around, yes, the Russia-Ukraine crisis and how to tackle it, India's role, so on and so forth. But there are too many bilateral aspects that one can't ignore. Trade conversations between the two countries, between India and the various countries that country leaders that he's meeting, that certainly is going to be discussed. Defense cooperation, security matters. There are many security tie-ups that you and I, or it's not in the public domain, and you and I would not really know the details of those security talks that are underway. But these are critical conversations that are taking place between leaders. With the French president, as we speak, there's going to be conversation about the defense cooperation as well, specifically to do with Rafales, and with the Korean Prime Minister, certainly the Indo-Pacific, security of the waters, the trouble and concern.
Let's just come to Indo-Pacific in just a moment. Since you mentioned, since there's a lot of conversation about China, since there's a lot of conversation about security in the Indo-Pacific, let's take that. And I'll just come to President Zelensky in a moment, because that meeting will take place shortly. But is India... in 10 minutes from now, is India under a lot of pressure? Because G7 countries, and if we were to talk about the United States and Britain, their end game is to put India under pressure to take a harder line on Russia. How is India tackling that pressure?
I think with over a year gone by, Gaurav, there is a realization, and a very strong one at that India is unmoved, unshaken, and will not be moved. It is not in our interest, in India's interest, so to say, to make that shift right now. Russia is a critical partner, and all these nations understand that. Where does India come in?
Give me a moment, Geeta. We are now joined by Solomia Bobrovska. She's a member of the Ukrainian Parliament and the Secretary Foreign Affairs Committee, Deputy Head of the Ukrainian delegation to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization Parliamentary Assembly. Solomia Bobrovska, many thanks for joining us here on India Today. We are looking at images of President Zelensky in Hiroshima. Ma'am, what are your expectations of President Zelensky meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
So first of all, I think that this meeting will be very crucial and very important for Ukraine, and actually for both leaders of the states. And finally, they could meet in person. They can finally talk in person. And I think, we all hope, as a Ukrainian nation, that India will a bit change their position on Russian-Ukrainian war. We saw during the last year, almost and a half, the neutrality, but we saw how deeply the ties from Russian side are in India, and how India is trying to keep the face with Ukraine, but more even with Russia, is saving so many Russian connections and ties, especially in India. And we hope, and we need that actually, and we want to rely on India as a not just the partner, but I would say even a friend. And we hope that India will change the position and won't be keeping the same side with Russia and China.
Okay. Ms. Bobrovska, when it comes to India-Ukraine ties, they have very warm relationship. You know, when Ukraine became an independent country, India was amongst the first to recognize it and open an embassy in Kiev. There was a consulate earlier in Odessa, and the first embassy that Ukraine opened in Asia was in India. So there is a very warm history. How can that be taken forward? What does President Zelensky bring to the table when he meets Prime Minister Modi?
Yes, you're quite right. And we had in 90s, they're really very warm, and and now as well. And we see how the embassy in Ukraine and your Indian citizens, how we all find the communications, and we have the very warm times. You're quite right. But we know how Russian is working. They with the economy proposals, with the military proposals, and so my perception that Zelensky will propose the much more deeper cooperation, much more new even pages of our cooperation from India-Ukrainian cooperation, and we have to be back to open, to discover each other, to be open more to each other, and finally to start the new track. And we hope that India will change the position from neutrality to support and condemning the Russian aggression in Ukraine. We need that.
Okay. As we look at these images of Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron, and that again is a very, very warm relationship that India shares. We are once again back to seeing those images of Prime Minister Narendra Modi with US President Joe Biden. Ma'am, stay with me for a moment. We quickly want to cut across and listen in to the US President Joe Biden.
Yes, but could you please repeat the question?
Economic security, all four are critical. We started to engage more private investors to better de-risk and leverage additional capital. And I see at least two from the United States here that are de-risking a lot. And I'm proud to announce that the United States has already mobilized more than $30 billion in investments to date. And we're just getting started. Together we have a lot of work to do to close the infrastructure gap and in low and middle income countries. And as we begin the next year, our partnership, we need to find new ways to maximize our investments. That's why moving forward, the United States will enhance our focus on investing in key economic corridors. In practice, that means making game-changing investments in regions that could lead to positive impacts across multiple sectors in multiple countries. We've already started working with our partners to make this happen. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, the U.S. Development Finance Corporation is looking to invest in this first railway project on the continent. A rail line would extend from the western shores of Angola to the border of the DRC and Zambia, with the goal of ultimately reaching the Indian Ocean, connecting the continent east to west for the first time. This project will not only quickly promote trade and create jobs, over time, in my view, it will strengthen supply chains, incentivize investments in agriculture, and promote food security. And it's going to enable, in my view, us to better access clean energy and digital connectivity across the entire region, creating more security, more prosperity, more opportunities for generations to come. That's what our focus on the key economic corridors is all about, investing in near-term solutions that pay long-term dividends. It's not only in Africa. We're starting similar work in Costa Rica, Ecuador, Indonesia, and other places I won't bore you with now. And let me close with this. During the G7 meeting, we're addressing a range of issues: climate change, food security, gender inequality, economic resilience, digital connectivity, and global security. We're tracking these challenges together, and I think we're beginning to make some important progress. But if we don't move to do more to strengthen infrastructure in low and middle income countries, if we don't do more to help nations deliver opportunities and prosperity for their people, our impact is going to be limited. That's how critical this partnership is. That's how important our investments are. So today, as we begin the PGII's second year, let's all find ways to maximize our investment. Maximize it, because it will do a lot not only for that particular undertaking, but it has an impact across the entire regions, in my view. And to unlock even more public and private capital. And together, let's recommit to showing that democracies can deliver. Let me say it again. Democracies can deliver. We have to deliver to people around the world. I want to thank you all for your partnership and leadership in this vital issue. And now I'm going to turn it back to the Prime Minister. Thank you.
はい、ジョーありがとう。続きまして、フォンデアライエン。
Being made by the US President Joe Biden there, democracies can deliver, democracies have to deliver, and spread the delivery of infrastructure development. The US President focusing on food security, clean energy, and infrastructure development, starting with sub-Saharan Africa. This is where a lot of effort is being made to counter China, checkmate China's debt trap diplomacy. There's breaking news coming in.
And we want to be part of the investments in infrastructure projects that bring good jobs.
China sends out the G7 sends out a big message to China. G7 countries are saying they remain seriously concerned about the situation in the East and South China Seas. G7 countries have said they strongly oppose any unilateral attempt to change the status quo either by force or by coercion. That's a big message that goes out to China from the 7 powerful economies of the world. The G7 countries and democracies say we call on China to act in accordance with its obligations under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, and not to conduct interference activities aimed at undermining the security and safety of our communities, the integrity of our democratic institutions, and our economic prosperity. The G7 countries have also said we will keep voicing our concerns about human rights situation in China, including in Tibet and in the Xinjiang province, where forced labor is of major concern to us. We call on China to honor its commitments under the Sino-British Joint Declaration and the Basic Law, which enshrines rights, freedoms, and a high degree of autonomy for Hong Kong. I once again want to cut across to India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan for more on this. Geeta, should this be seen as virtually the right act being read out to China on what Chinese actions may be, not just in the East and South China Sea, but globally?
Well, absolutely, to China and to Russia. Remember, at the G20 foreign ministers meeting, or for that matter, any meeting, we're not being able to find consensus, Gaurav, but the G7 over here quite clear that they're going to support Russia till Russia. They're going to continue supporting Ukraine till Russia's illegal occupation and aggression continues. The second very important thing which President Biden also highlighted was supply chains directed completely at China, that unless and until there are 2 aspects to Chinese aggression. One is the economic aggression, and the reason why we see so many countries debt trapped, and that only can be resolved through resilient supply chains. And the most important part is freedom of navigation, open maritime spaces for all countries to navigate through freely and openly, and that certainly is a part of the preamble in the leaders' communique of the G7 leaders. So a lot of critical points that have been made by the leaders over here, but the global infrastructure is something that they're looking at, resilient supply chains, and